Recording now. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leah Smalley. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Services here at the Coordinating Board, and we work for the Student Financial Aid Programs Department. And the reason that I decided to launch this webcast was because I wanted to make sure that information was getting disseminated out to the institutions, and so we could kind of open up the dialogue for things that y'all want to know more about. And so I thought this would be a good way to do that, to make it easier on everyone so that we could make sure that any new correspondence coming out can be discussed, any training opportunities could be discussed, and that y'all could give me ideas on what you want to know more about. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, we will have a questions part at the end, so you're welcome to ask questions now, but it may make it easier if you hold those so that I can see it at the end and we can kind of go through them. I will tell you now, I won't be able to answer every question y'all have, either because of time constraints or because I simply don't have that information, but that is the goal, is to collect your questions from you and get back to you, so we'll go through that as much as possible. So with that being said, let's get going. So on today's agenda, I've listed that we're going to do a legislative recap so we can see what's going on with the session and give you some information. We're going to talk about the review of the EFC priority that came out in January. Some of you may or may not be aware of that change in the wording. We're also going to go through the program guidelines that were released last August and then talk a little bit about the ones that are going to be coming up for 1920. And then what I'd love to do is show you guys the Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, which I would think many of you use now, but in the event that you're familiar with the older site, I just wanted to kind of go through the pages and of course get your feedback, because we are looking to kind of move some stuff around and wanted to find out what's useful and what's not useful from institution's perspective. After that, I'm going to do an online inquiry demo to show you how to kind of get in touch with us, what kind of things that you can send over to the coordinating board, and then I'll be going over some upcoming events, trainings, and deadlines. So let's get started with the session. Starting in January, the session started. It was the 86th session, and it will go through May. So there are over 270 bills that the coordinating board was monitoring and giving feedback on. And out of those bills, Student Financial Aid Programs, as of last week, was monitoring about 44 of those bills and has since gone up since then. A group of the bills were focused on loan repayment programs, others were revisions to current legislation, and others were brand new programs. So many of you on this webcast may or may not be familiar with these bills, and many of them do impact the programs that you have at your schools. So if you don't know which ones impact you, my recommendation is definitely talk to your management. They should know or be giving input on these bills. But I did want to talk about a few of them briefly today and then give you some resources on what you can do if you're interested in following the session and knowing how some of these bills end up progressing through the session. So the first bill that I'd like to talk about, sorry, just a minute. Okay. So the first one I want to talk about is Senate Bill 1192 and House Bill 3042. Senator West and Representative Chris Turner have introduced this for the Texas Works program, and Works stands for Working Off Campus, Reinforcing Knowledge and Skills, and it's an internship program. The coordinating board's recommendation will provide paid internship opportunities for full-time undergraduate students, and it will advance the state's 60 by 30 goals relating to marketable skills and student debt. Specifically, this bill authorizes the coordinating board to utilize part of the work-study appropriation to administer a centralized off-campus work-study program. And the priorities would be established in program rule and would include activities supporting timely completion, such as it would require enrollment of 15 or more credits, and integrate concepts of wraparound services, such as like online training or other activities to prepare students for basic work expectations. It's really to help prepare students for their career and, of course, in life. So one thing about this bill that is important to know is that it removes the off-campus requirement for the work-study program, which I know for many people has been difficult to implement. And so if this were to pass, it would remove the at least 20%, but no more than 50% requirement that requires that the employment positions be located off-campus. So that is Senate Bill 1192 and House Bill 3042. The next one is House Bill 2968, and it was introduced by Representative John Frullo and has been introduced to help protect the ability of the coordinating board to obtain sufficient bonding authority to support the college access loan program. There's been increasing demand for the limited pool of tax-exempt statewide bonding authority, which creates a risk for the coordinating board because we may not be able to secure adequate bonding authority to fund the loan program. So this bill increases the amount of our authority to request per issuance from $75 million currently up to a projected $200 million, and this would ensure adequate funding is available to support the student loan program, which, as many of you know, and a lot of the schools on this call, you use college access loan, and so this is really critical to have that authority. The next one is Senate Bill 34. It was introduced by Senator Judith Saffirini, and it reduces the lifetime eligibility for the Texas grant program from 150 semester credit hours down to 135. This is 15 credits beyond the degree requirements. It's whichever is greater. So this recommendation will encourage students and institutions to focus on efficient degree completion while still providing a cushion beyond degree requirements. Also, the agency estimates that implementing 135 cap on the eligibility requirements will allow institutions to redirect about 11.2 million to approximately 2,400 new eligible students. Our agency is examining data regarding the impact of the change by different categories of students, but the larger point is that incenting more efficient degree completion will benefit all students by reducing their cost of education and increasing their likelihood of success. The last two bills that have the same purpose are Senate Bill 330 and House Bill 3137. These allow a student enrolled in a community college baccalaureate degree program to receive TEOG up to 135 hours or 15 hours beyond their degree requirement. So this addresses an issue that arose when the legislature approved the expansion of the program last session, and it will allow students in this program to access appropriate state financial aid, because right now they cannot access that grant funding, and so it really limits them on what they can pay for. Let me hop back. So I wanted to just go through those. There are many, many more. Many of you probably are thinking other ones that have come up at your schools, and I wanted to go through how you can get information on these bills in the event you're not familiar with the process. I'm trying to load this onto my screen, so just give me a moment. So if you can see my screen, I have some session resources that I'd like to go through with you. The first one is the Texas Legislature Online. So this is the way that you would actually be able to look up a bill. So when you click on the bill, it's going to load a screen that has the bill number. So when you type in the bill number here, it will pull information. So I'm actually going to do that for y'all right now based on the ones that we just talked about. So if I type in Senate Bill 330, it's going to pull up a very small snippet and kind of give you where it's at in the process over here. So this is very useful. Another thing that I wanted to show y'all is if you're interested in certain bills, you can actually set up an account through the Texas Legislature Online up here under My TLO. When you click on it, you can sign up for alerts right here. You have to create a new user account, And then what it'll do is you can add bills to follow as they go through the session. So I feel like that's very helpful if there's something that you're really, really wanting to keep a close eye on. Some of the other resources, going back to the slide, oops, excuse me, the news resources through the Texas Tribune, they publish things daily on their website, so you can look at the session there. It's very, very helpful. Once this pulls up, you can see over here there's the 86th legislature. When you click on that, it has lots of different articles. There's different things that you can stream, watch now. There's things that are live. So this is very useful, again, to keep connected with what's going on. Let's see. The other thing, just to mention that there was recently a higher education interview, so I put that one on here. It is under the same thing under the Texas Tribune if you want to watch it. And the last thing that I wanted to point it out was last week, the Financial Aid Advisory Committee met last Wednesday, and they did go over a lot of these bills that I just discussed. And there was a lot of conversation about different things, and so I wanted to make you aware of that because this is also a live broadcast that was saved that you can go through and watch the video. It's, I believe, approximately an hour and 55 minutes into the meeting, so you can fast forward to that section. Dr. Ginger Gosman was the one that presented, and you can listen to hers, and then it goes on from there. And there's very, very good discussions on concerns that other institutions have on some of these bills. And unfortunately, I can't go through all those today, but I wanted to let you know about this resource so that you can have that information to see what people are talking about from these institutions. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on. So the next thing on the presentation is to talk about the expected family contribution priority. On January 30th of this year, a memo was sent out announcing the award amounts for the year. And part of that memo included some verbiage that clarified the EFC changes for Texas Grant and TEOG. In prior years, the guidance that we released from the coordinating board was that there was an EFC maximum for initial year awards to determine eligibility. It was something that went out every single year, and it was provided in the guidelines. Well, when we looked at the statute and administrative rules, we found that it really states that institutions must give priority to students who demonstrate the greatest financial need, and there's no limit on using an EFC maximum or a cap, as we usually call it. So the reason this is important is because we've had questions now. I wanted to clarify. Schools have been asking if a student has an EFC that goes beyond the amount that was published, which I'm trying to pull up right now, then can they award those students? And the answer is you can if you've awarded everyone else who has the highest financial need first, and you do the priorities that are listed. So you always do your renewals first, and then you do your initial year awards. So what's important to know now is that the amount that we publish is just a guide. It is used to prioritize award, but it's not restricting awards. So you can go above that if you have funding left over. It's not required, but it's just to let people know that there will no longer be the verbiage of a cap or a maximum. Okay, so moving on. Talking about program guidelines. Late last year in August, we released the 2018-19 program guidelines, and I wanted to kind of go through some of the changes today and then talk about the upcoming guidelines, because based on feedback and discussions with different schools, it was obvious that those guidelines came out very late, and therefore people had already done the packaging for the year and they didn't really know a lot of the changes that had happened. So since those changes do impact this upcoming year, I thought it would be a good idea. I'm going to pull up Texas Grant to show you guys, even though there are some other programs that have different changes, but I thought it would be a good idea to go through these guidelines since they include the majority of the updates. I'm going to show everybody where to find the guidelines if you're new or you're not familiar with where to find them. So the program guidelines are released each year, and what we try and do is include hyperlinks to not only the statute but the program rules so that you can find exactly how they're written. They should always supersede these guidelines. They are the rules and the laws that have been passed, and the guidelines are really just to provide additional guidance or procedural information to make the administration more easy. So in Texas Grant and in some of the other programs, one of the things we added this year was putting an alert box for the new state priority deadline. So now that that has passed, it was on January 15th, you won't see that in here. It'll simply be updated in the state priority deadline section. But that was something that was definitely a hot topic when it came out. So we wanted to make sure that everyone's aware that the state priority deadline did change. It went from March 15th and was moved back to January 15th. And that was a decision that was made by the Financial Aid Advisory Committee after doing a lot of research and determining that moving it up would be in the best interest of not only schools but students. Another change that was made that was relatively big to the guidelines this year was the addition of a student selective service statement. In the Texas Administrative Code and the Texas Education Code, both include language that requires a school to collect a written statement. So what we did this last year is we added this to the guidelines. Again, many schools had already packaged and potentially even paid students by the time it came out. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of this requirement. In here, it has guidance on how to use the statement and when to collect that. And the statement down here is what you can use to incorporate into either your online documents. I've heard some schools say that they've added it to their TASPA packet. There's different ways that people are doing that to collect this statement. But one of the things that we've heard most is, well, when do we collect it? Do we have to use that? And because of all the different scenarios, one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a minute is adding clarity to the guidelines on when to collect it and for who. So I'll be talking about that in just a moment, but that was one of the bigger ones. We didn't get a lot of feedback, but again, I don't know if that's because schools didn't even know it existed because, again, they came out so late, or if it was just not really people didn't see that new requirement in there. I didn't get a lot of feedback, so I'll be curious to hear what y'all think. Going back down, in prior years, we had really reduced this section, the controlled substance restrictions. We did go back in and added the sample back in. That was part of the prior year guidelines that we had kind of scaled back on. We got feedback saying that that was a useful piece in the guidelines, so we did go back and add that in. You'll notice throughout the guidelines we put these boxes with alerts and stop signs. That is intended to get your attention so that you know either of an important rule, an important process, or something that has changed. So if, for example, this one is nothing new, it's just a big stop sign saying, hey, make sure you know this information because it's something that is very important when administering the Texas Grant Program. Another big change in 1819 was the elimination of reallocation. So hopefully you all know, based on the fact that we didn't do a reallocation this year, that for the grant programs it has gone away. It was something that was changed in the rule. So for 1819, schools now have till this August 1st, or the working day if it fell on a weekend, to request program funds. The February reallocation will no longer exist. So the way that they changed the rule is that for each biennium, so every 2 years, funds that are not requested in the first year can be rolled over to the second. You can't request more of your money in advance, but you can if you have leftover money, which I realize is very rare, but if you did, or if you wanted to hold on to money to roll over, you can now do that. So 2018-19 is the second year of the biennium, so we're about to start a new biennium with 19-20. So I wanted to just, because I'm a very visual person, I thought I could show you what that's going to look like. So the next biennium will be 19-20 and 20-21. So if funds are requested through each term on an as-needed basis up until August 1st of next year, and then any unused funds would be rolled over to the following year, which is 2021. You would then have till August 1st of that year to use your money, otherwise those funds are forfeited and the coordinating board would use those as needed. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a second, make sure. Sorry about that. I'm scrolling too quickly. Okay, so 19-20 guidelines. I really wanted to show like actual visual of those, but they're still in draft form, and because this is being recorded, I didn't want to risk that it was incorrect information online. So a few updates for the sneak peek portion of this is that we are planning to release those in April this year. We got, again, countless feedback from everyone saying, hey, we really, really want to get that information sooner. It helps us to make sure we're packaging people correctly and we're in compliance. So we are in the midst of drafting and getting those revised. Now, that being said, we are in the middle of legislative session. So our plan is to go ahead and release those, and then in the event that there's any changes that would impact packaging or just compliance risks, then we would release updates to those guidelines. So like I mentioned a moment ago, one of the things that we got some questions on was selective service. Because a lot of institutions had their own processes in place, potentially a statement already. A lot of these students had already submitted all their documentation. We got a lot of, well, when do we do this and when do we not do this and when does it go into effect? And a lot of questions came about. So I did revisit the selective service statement. I met with our legal team and internal management, and we are trying at this point to really kind of clarify certain scenarios. Like I mentioned, we're going to put that in the guidelines. It really will mirror last year's, so if you want to look at that in advance, you'll get a good idea of how the statement will work. But again, adding a couple little layers of additional detail I think will be helpful so that schools know for this particular scenario, do I have to collect it or not? And then on top of that, the schools are given quite a bit of flexibility on what to collect and for documentation purposes, especially if a student is exempt. But on this slide, what I kind of tried to break it down into two buckets. When do you collect it and when do you not collect it? So the main concept is that if an ICER comes in and it could not go through the database match for selective service, and it comes through with the C code, you would need to collect the statement to confirm whatever status, because at that point you don't know if they're registered or not. So that's what the statement is going to collect, and then you would collect the appropriate documentation. So if they are registered, you can print it off the Selective Service website to go along with the statement. If the student is exempt from registering, then you would collect that appropriate documentation. The second bullet there talks about when a male student is not going to complete a FAS, so therefore you don't have an ICER, then if they're applying for state aid, you do have to get the statement and any backup documentation. So that's when you would collect the statement. So any student that does an ICER that goes through the database match, you don't have to collect anything if they're registered. So the FAFSA signature and ICER counts as their statement because it's a federal document. They're sending that through this database match and it's coming through on the other end. So therefore we're not going to have that as a requirement. Obviously if the student's female, they're exempt from registration, so you would not have to collect anything. And this third one is the one that, again, got everyone kind of asking questions, is if you had a process in place and you already collected based on that process, we didn't want schools to have to go back and collect a statement for all those students. Now, if you did, that's fantastic. If you did not, then just know that going forward for new or transferring students, basically anyone who you don't have that validation on, you would want to collect the statement. So it's only for students that you already did it previously to the 18-19 year, since again we released those late. I did hear from certain schools it was no problem, and then others, you know, they have a huge population, so it really was variable amongst all the schools. So again, look for some slight modifications. It will not be a lot on the guidelines, but I did want to let people know so that you can make sure that you're using the statement the same way at all schools. So another thing that we're weaving into the guidelines and that we will be releasing official guidance on is summer awarding. Since the program rule changed to allow funding to be used all the way through August, that means that summer awarding is a possibility. And so we did get questions, well, how would that work? You know, there's different scenarios and lots of questions that came up. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to incorporate in different sections in the guidelines to help paint that picture. I don't know why the word spring is not on my slide. I just noticed that, so I apologize. But going forward in the guidelines, like I said, keep an eye out for either one new section, or we may even be putting multiple sections in different places with alert boxes so you know, but that will help guide you through the process if you choose to do summer awarding. That is available for 18-19. Based on the feedback that we've heard, there's not a lot of schools with money left. Therefore, they're not planning to do any summer awarding. I don't know, since we have a lot of people on the call, I'm sure it's all over the board. You may be choosing to do that, but since we haven't released any official guidance, that will be coming in the next month or so, so keep an eye out for that. I'm going to move on to our live website demonstration. Like I mentioned, the reason I'm going to do this is because if you've been around for a while, our prior website, not only for the coordinating board, but for financial aid, was not the easiest to use. And so the agency decided to redesign the website, and during that decision, we decided to move our financial aid programs webpage onto it to make it easier and more accessible for schools. Because if you remember, if you were here, if you didn't have the link to our website, you really couldn't access it. It was not a way to get to that website unless you were given a direct link, and it was very frustrating, especially for new employees that didn't know about the website. That being said, we still gotten questions, where do we find certain information on the website? So I thought it would be a good idea to go through that as a group and just kind of see some of the options that are available, and then just show you some cool tools on here. So this is a live version of our website. It was redesigned last year, and again, we decided to move financial aid programs onto this web page. In order to find student financial aid programs, you're going to go up to Institutional Resources and Programs and click on Student Financial Aid Programs. This web page has additional web pages embedded, and it has a ton of information. So I'm going to quickly go through the different types, and then we'll click on each one just to make sure you kind of have a feel of where to get information. At the top here, each week we try and update the news you can use. It's a spot for you to know kind of upcoming deadlines, things that are going on, if the agency is going to be closed. So again, each week we review this and we update that to make sure that institutions are aware of things that are on the horizon or anything that's critical that you submit. Our Stay Connected page, which I'm going to kind of click back and forth so you can see it. Our Stay Connected page includes now, as of last week, we have our monthly webcast. So this is where you can go to click on the information, and then once more and more webcasts become available, there will be a list underneath where you can click these recorded sessions, and then you can give those to fellow coworkers, or you can go back and listen to something again if you need to. So that's where this will be housed. Underneath that is our memo section, and we recently redid this just to include recent communications, roughly 10 to 15 of the most current ones that are important to the administration of financial aid. So that's where these recent communications are. And then we archived old memos down here for y'all if you need to find something from prior years, or once we've exceeded our 15 max at the top. So once you expand down here, you can find stuff from this year that's a little bit older. You can even go back. As you can see, we release a lot of memos. So it's really important to stay up to speed in the event you don't get the notification. I recommend at least once a week, maybe every other week, go in here and just click on them just to see what's been posted. So that's the memos. How do you get the memos? You may wonder, like, how do I get on this magical listserv so that I can get the information? The Student Financial Aid Programs listserv is specific to financial aid administrators. You click on this form, fill it out, and you hit subscribe. Once we get the form in, we will add you to the topics based on your job title. So most correspondents are going to go to directors only. Sometimes they go to presidents, and then very general information such as this webcast goes to a general listserv. So we do have it broken down that way just so we try and filter information to the appropriate group. If you have someone on your team or you feel the need that you need to be in something, you would want to reach out to us directly so we can make sure we have you in the right place. But we send memos, I would say minimum once a week, if not more. Sometimes we send multiple in a day. It really just depends. We 99.9% of the time will not send one on a Friday. So that is part of our policy. We don't send stuff out since most people tend to have lower staff in the office. It's just easier to miss. So another thing under here, we have our calendar program deadlines. This includes things that are coming up for the entire fiscal year. So we are working on the new 1920 right now, and we will replace this once it's available. It's nice to print out and just put on your wall so you have it. And then we do have a link to our Financial Aid Advisory Committee, which I mentioned before. The advisory committee meets quarterly, so 4 times a year. And all of the agendas, meeting minutes, and the broadcasts are all saved by date here. So it's a really great resource if you want to get caught up or you want to kind of skim through the meeting minutes to see what people are talking about in the financial aid community, because the advisory committee is a group of primarily directors, but we do have school districts and other representatives, including TASFA, that sit on that to provide feedback to the coordinating board and to make decisions on certain policies. So that is important. So going back, I'm going to go back to our main page. So we talked about stay connected. We also have program resources. We have a ton of program resources. This is where all of our guidelines are maintained. We post, I'll just show you right here. We have different instruction manuals. We have our allocations. So there's anything associated with the grant programs are going to be under here. Same for all the other programs. So loan programs, work study. And one of the things that I like to point out on exemption and waivers is we have this chart, and a lot of people may not know exists. This does have all exemption and waiver programs. It's tied to the statute as well as any program rules. So I know that internally we use this chart quite a bit, and I wanted to make sure that institutions know that this is a resource that you can use. Going back, so again, program resources, this is where we post our TASFA. TASFA is also available on College for All Texans, which is the student and public facing site. But you can get a copy here, and we post those in October. Going to our frequently asked questions is actually a newer page. We released this last year. We did broad categories for each one, and then at the bottom we actually have a trending section. We're looking to actually move trending to the top, something that we're working on in the coming months. But trending is going to be usually based on the current environment or what's going on. And if we're getting a high volume of questions, we'll post it under trending. And then if it's something that's going to stay around for a while, we'll move it under the topics. So I did want to bring this to everybody's attention because not only did we work very hard on it, but it does answer some of the common questions that we get just continually through the coordinating board. So if you're new to state aid, or maybe you're wondering just what's under here, it has like the basic questions that come through to us. And again, we do plan on expanding these if we get ones that we feel are appropriate to post. Going back, almost through this one. The learning resources, we do post when we have available things like learning modules. We did a bunch of HelmNet trainings a while back, which is our loan portal. So each of these has different things that you can click on at your leisure. They're just recorded and you can pause as needed. So that's important to know that these are here if you have new staff on board. The one at the very bottom is something that we created. We don't get a lot of these, again, maybe because people don't know it's there, I don't know, but it's a training request form. While we can't guarantee that we'll be able to accommodate the request, you can absolutely send this in to us, and we can look at setting up either an online webinar, conference call. We can come to your institution. We do ask that you give us a little bit of notice so that we can coordinate that, but we really are trying to get out to the schools and provide training to those that request it. So if you have any interest, again, it's no guarantee that we can do it, but we are really trying this year to do that. So you just fill it out and submit it, and then we will get in touch with you to get more information. Okay, and then the last thing is online resources. So this is going to contain all of our reporting information, such as FADs. Many of you are familiar with the financial aid database report. It has the reconciliation form. This is also the forms that you use to request and return money. Not request money, excuse me, the return of funds form. And then one of the most common used forms is our system authorization form. This form allows the director to submit account requests to either update or add requests. So this form is very important because it allows the coordinating board to review your current access and make those changes. And so you fill out the form and you hit submit and it sends it off to us. The portals, again, if you're familiar with Move It, DMZ is used primarily for loans and for FAD reporting, some others as well, but that's primarily what it's used for. CVPass is a portal that we use for award history, to request funds, and it may serve a future purpose. I know some schools are participating in Good Neighbor program, and that's how they access that. HelmNet is the loan portal that you certify your college access loans, your Beyond Time loans, and your Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program loans, the TASP. We have our net price calculator, which will be coming up in the next few months, that we require schools to update, and then college student budgets, which is actually a department outside of ours, but we put their login here as well. So that, I just said a lot of information. So this is, in a nutshell, that's what we have available. Again, we're looking at kind of trying to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So I would love y'all's feedback. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to provide y'all my email so you can send me any feedback you have, but we're definitely looking for feedback because we have heard that it's not easy to find things, and it may be because it's embedded within the agency site, I don't know, but would love to hear that from you guys. Let's see, the next thing that I wanted to go through is if you do want to get in touch with us outside of emailing me directly about this webcast, we have a process in place at the coordinating board to send us online inquiries, and we call it the Contact Us. It's on all of our memos, it's on this website, and you can click it over up here on our main page. Or if you go down to the very bottom, there's an inquiries. It launches the same page. But when you hit Contact Us, I wanted to go through this as a demo because sometimes we get these inquiries in and they don't have all the information that we need, and it can cause your request to get delayed. And so I thought it was really important to bring this to everybody's attention so that you can understand kind of how it flows through our process here. So when you have a question on eligibility, or when you have a loan report request, some schools that process loans can ask for loan reports, and then we have loan processing changes, you would use this form to get in touch with us. This form replaced the grant info email. We do not use or maintain that email address anymore, which was used for many, many years by the coordinating board. So this is how we do that. So when you fill this out, you would want to type in your institution. You select institution, and when you start typing, so I'm just going to pick something easy like Baylor. Baylor University, you click that there. The reason typing your institution is actually very important is because our area is broken up by school types. So we've got certain people that work on private schools, some that work on universities, some that work on community colleges. So if that's not filled in correctly, we can still process it. It just takes longer. So that's a huge benefit for us. It just helps us route it easier. Contact reason should always be financial aid question. Financial aid question is going to come to financial aid services, which is where all institutional support takes place. So if you can put that in there, regardless of the type, again, we handle all eligibility questions, reporting, or loan processing questions. Within the description, you'll want to include as much information as possible. We don't ask that you put a full social security number for security purposes, but you can put the last four. But for anything that you put in here, again, the more information, the better response you're going to get. And I don't know how many people have used this, but a lot of times we end up calling the person that submits it because we just don't have enough information, which actually takes me down to this other section. When you fill out the contact, which only requires email and your name, what we're requesting, even though it's not required, is putting your phone number, because again, sometimes it's a lot easier to just pick up the phone and call you and go through your question, and then 9 times out of 10 we're going to still respond in writing, but it helps us get through the request faster. So that's just a special request from me. If you can put that in there, that would be helpful. And when you hit submit, again, if you fill in all those steps correctly, then it comes through to us almost instantaneously. It comes through pretty quickly. If you don't fill out this information correctly, it could go to one of many areas, to many people who may not even be in the office that day. So it's really important that this piece be filled out correctly. Go back. So that is how you send an online inquiry to get in touch with us. I'm going to move on since we're kind of getting low on time. We are kind of getting towards the end. I wanted to make sure that we got time to type in some questions if you have them. But I wanted to talk to y'all about some, let me pull this up, some upcoming events and deadlines. So training-wise, many of your staff, or maybe you're going to the Tassville Regional Training. There are 5 this year. There's one in El Paso, one in Lubbock, Dallas-Fort Worth area, Houston, and we're hosting one here in Austin. So on April 10th, 2019, Coordinating Board will be hosting a site. So if you're central, then you may consider coming here. We're also going to be at the New Aid Officer Workshop. So if you're a new employee, you may consider going to that. I will let you know that the presentation at TASPA will be very similar to this one. We're presenting on a lot of the same topics. And then finally, like I mentioned, this will be a monthly webcast, and it will be driven by feedback that I get from today's on what topics y'all want next month. I will have dedicated topics, but then I can take on suggestions as well. Some upcoming deadlines. We have the task nomination period opens on April 15th. Some information on that will be going out to legislators so that they know what to do and what all the deadlines are, but wanted to let you know that that's actually opening up. And then the validation deadline for your FAS report is coming up on April 15th. Some general updates I wanted to just make you aware of. Some of these have not come out yet and others have. So the auto grant processing is something I wanted to introduce. I'm going to be sending out with my team some additional information, just introducing the idea that grant requests for funding will change slightly in the summer months, and it is going to benefit the institutions because it will just allow for you to see your allocation and track how much money has been drawn down, how much you have pending. There's going to be some reporting capabilities. So unlike now when you log in to request funding, you have to track all that manually on your end. So I know that it can be very cumbersome. So the coordinating board's working on an auto grant processing, which means that it's going to be all online so that you know how many students you've requested and how much money you've requested. So that is supposed to launch in summer of this year, and more guidance and information will be coming available. I'll probably give an update each month at this webcast. Allocations are currently being calculated for the preliminary data that's going to go out, so we are working on those. They have not gone out. We've gotten some calls saying, you know, when is that going to happen? We are working on that, so as soon as the preliminary figures are available, we'll be sending that out to you guys for review. On January 31st, there was an online ACH rolled out for the loan programs. And if a student were to sign up for that online, they get a 0.25% reduction in their interest rate. So to me, that's kind of big because of student debt and just educating your students on this benefit, because if they're making their payment anyway and they could get this discount, then they would just need to go online and sign up for that. Something that we are implementing is on April 26th of 19 is a credit card processing fee. This is pretty standard across organizations, but we are implementing that. So when a student does a credit card payment online, they will be charged a fee for that. And lastly, coming up in May, the Cal interest rate is going to be reduced by 1.1 percentage point. So it's going down from 5.3 down to 5.2. So you'll want to be aware of that in case your student is going to be applying for a loan anywhere near that deadline. They would benefit from doing that after it goes down. Now, granted, we will send something out letting you know exactly if it's on or after May 1st. That's when it's targeted for, so just keep a lookout for that memo because we will send that out. So, last off, I wanted to make sure that everyone has our toll-free number. We're starting to see an uptick in direct calls to people on our team, which, trust me, totally get it. It's just that sometimes people are not always at their desks, or maybe they're out sick. So to make sure that you can get somebody when you call, I would recommend calling our institutional toll-free number, which is on the screen. It's 844-792-2640. It's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And the only time it's closed is if we have some kind of training or team meeting, and we do send out a notice in advance to let you know. So I highly encourage that you use that toll-free number so that, again, you don't sit waiting for a callback in the event someone's out that day. And from there, I am going to open it up for questions. I did give you a disclaimer at the beginning that I will do my best to answer your questions. I am in no way an expert, but I can do that if you want. I have one question already, and it says, are slides available for today's training? And the answer is, I actually am planning to post this online. I just need to save it into a PDF, and then we'll put it online under the webcast. So the website walkthrough that I showed you on the Stay Connected, we'll go ahead and post the slides so that you have that available. Anyone else? And just as a reminder, as you type your questions, they are being recorded. So keep that in mind. Anyone have any questions? On selective service, do we collect once? Great question. So the short answer is yes. Once you've collected it and you have any documentation, then you should be good to go. The only time that I can think that that would not apply is if you have someone who is potentially exempt and their status could change. So for example, a 17-year-old is exempt from selective service. So they would be marking that they're exempt on the statement, but the following year they turn 18. Now they're not registered. So granted, when they do their FAFSA or TASFA, hopefully they are registering at that point, but that's a situation where their form, their statement would change. So that's really the only one that I've come up with where you would need to continue to collect it until they're of the age. But outside of that, if you have someone who's exempt, for example, who entered the United States after the requirement to register, and so therefore you've already collected everything, then you wouldn't need to continually collect it every year because you should have that in the student's file. Did that answer your question, Michelle? Perfect. And I think that I'm pretty sure that that's in the guidance on the upcoming guidelines, so we'll double check that to make sure it's clear. But it's always kind of those, you know, the little scenarios that you have to really think through. Does that apply or not? The next question, where can we find guidelines for Texas Grant Awards for this summer? So the summer guidelines are going to be included in each one of the grant programs. So once we release those in April, you'll just pull up the new Texas grant and then it will have a section for summer awards in there. And then anything that's not addressed or you still have a question, then you would send something through Contact Us, and we could even potentially set up a call if we needed to. The next question is, when will we receive guidance for Texas Grant? So hopefully I just answered that one. And again, we will be sending out some guidance as well. So we're going to send out an official memo. I don't know how much detail will be in that memo, but we do plan to release something. Do you have a date in April that would be released? As of right now, the goal is prior to the end of April. If we can do them sooner, we will. And the way that we're going to release guidelines this year is as they are approved. So instead of all at once on one day, if we get Texas Grant done first, we'll release it. If we get college access loan, we'll release that. It just really depends on the approval process. But again, all of them are drafted. They're all pending approval. We do have to go through an additional step to make things accessible for ADA standards. So that does take some additional time, but that does allow for anyone with that need so that they can have that. I know that that's something that has changed now that we changed to this new website. So I think I answered that. Lots of questions on the summer awards, so that's good. Any other questions? Don't see any yet. Maybe people are actively typing. I don't know. You can't actually see when people are typing, so I don't know that that's the case. But I'll give people a couple more minutes. I do see some people have dropped off at this point, so it's possible that everyone is happy with all the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for those that are still on the call, do you feel like this was a success and was it helpful?
Shut down my whole computer.
Oh.
We keep taking over my headset.
I don't know how to. No, I don't know. I don't know how.
I do have one question, Imelda, that just
Everything
we need to
comes through
collect the
here.
selective service statement every year for undocumented students.
Yeah, a lot of people
That would be
are
the
like
same
that.
requirement for any student. If you would collect it once and their
You just
status
watched
would
it.
not change, either because they're registered or because they're
Yeah, that's pretty
exempt,
good. She got a lot of
then
information.
you would just collect it the one time and keep it in the file. And I will let you know, it's not set in stone, but
Presentation
Financial
what?
Aid Advisory Committee has
Oh,
a
okay, cool.
TASFA subcommittee, and one
That's
of the
cool.
things that they're discussing is adding the statement to the
I
TASFA.
thought of
So
adding something funny, but I better not.
most schools that we've talked to
No,
are
so
very
like I
in
said,
favor
hey,
of that. It's
where are y'all
not
located?
final yet, but I
Huh?
will.
PG what?
Um,
Smooth. Only we
I
know
do
that.
think
So
that will happen. So
I'm gonna be in
please
a meeting
mute
myself
your
at 3.
mic, Raphael.
So what?
Hang on. Let me see. Okay, I muted him. Hopefully that helped. It didn't pop up as anyone, so I just did that. Did that help? Okay. All right. Okay, so we only have 4 more minutes. I will... Everyone's excited to see Raphael, so that's great. Oh, all right. Can you repeat? Which one am I repeating? I have no idea. This is the hard part about the part where Raphael was speaking over. I think the last question that was asked was about selective service being collected each year for undocumented students, and my response was that you would not need to collect a statement every year after you've collected it once if their status would not change. For example, they're registered, you collect the statement, you get the printout from Selective Service, you don't need to continue to collect that each year. If you have a student that's exempt, same thing. It would only be if their status is changing. And I gave you the one example I could think of. The other thing I mentioned was that there's a TASFA subcommittee, and one of the recommendations that they are making is to add Selective Service to the TASFA. And so if you use the TASFA for your undocumented population, then hopefully going forward, it'll just be part of that process. So Kathy Wright is asking, if we have questions about how the funding works and the changes, who would we ask? If you have questions, you can always send it through Contact Us, and then we will route it to the appropriate person. If you still have questions, then you would just respond saying you wanted to talk to somebody further, and we could set up a conference call at that point. You can even request to have someone call you through there, Kathy. Good. All right, well, we've got 2 minutes. I'm going to give people one more, and then I'm going to stop the recording. And like I said, the plan is to post the recording online through Stay Connected, and then I'll also post the slides that go with it. Of course, it'll be part of the presentation, but you can skim through it much more quickly. And then next month, the webcast is on the 9th of April, same time, 2 o'clock. And if you have recommendations, I wanted to point that out. One last thing, since I have y'all on the call, is I'm really trying to encourage feedback for the staff here. We hear it on the phone a lot, but we do actually have a customer satisfaction survey. If you have feedback for the coordinating board in general or for our area, you can go on there and give us that feedback. If you go to the main agency page, it is listed under, let me pull it up so I can tell you. Hopefully you can still see my screen. If you go under here under other state links, and then there's a customer satisfaction survey, you can fill that out, and then it gets routed through to us so we know if we need to make improvements on something that we're doing. But that's really like more of a customer satisfaction. If you have questions or other types of feedback, you can always use the Contact Us link. All right, everybody. Well, I see people dropping off. I really appreciate y'all joining. It's very exciting for me. I hope that y'all got some good information. Please email me. I'm going to pull up my email real quick. I meant to do that earlier. And, oh, excuse me. There's my email if you would like to email me any of your feedback. And I will see y'all next month. Thank you so much. Have a great, great week.